Welcome to the Photo Op Podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things photo and video. I'm Ben Lucas.
And I'm Stuart Marlantis.
And this is Photo Op. All right, so this week we have two listener questions.
Listener question special.
Yay! So the first listener question comes from Lou. Thank you, Lou. Are LED cob lights or panels better? Before I know you're going to get into the tech specs about that. If you don't know what the question is and you are listening to us on the YouTube channel instead of in podcast form, I have some here so you can see what the heck this question actually means. So an LED panel is the one that you are probably familiar with. It looks like this guy. This one happens to have a yoke and a barn door on it, but it is an LED panel. Ta-da!
A big flat panel with lots of little LEDs on it.
A big flat panel. And so if I pull out the diffusion panel, it's got all of these tiny little LED elements that when you put the diffusion panel in front of it, turns into one kind of soft light source. And this one is about 1 foot by 1 foot-ish. It's a little rectangular. The dimensions aren't exact. But yes, this is an LED panel. Now, what is a cob light? I have no idea. I do happen to own one, though. So this is a cob light. So Stuart, what the heck makes this different than
so
an
a
LED
cob
panel?
light? Cob stands for a chip on board. And yes, there is like a little board that chip sits on. The chip being the LED light. It's basically instead of a bunch of little LED lights.
It's
all
one
spread out.
big
it's one huge one that has some sort of heat dissipation attached to it because they put out a lot of heat.
Literally, you can look all the way through this. This whole thing is completely empty.
Heat sink and fan.
Heat sink and fan. That's all this is.
You know, they're kind of akin to like strobe lights, like a studio strobe light, but continuous for video. It's like a modeling light, but even brighter.
But crazy bright.
Crazy bright.
For sure. So, what do you like better, LED panels or cob lights?
The answer is the always disappointing. It depends. It really depends.
At one point in time, we need to do a roundup video of every single time we say video. It depends.
Yeah. So I would say to give you an extremely short answer, I prefer cob lights, but it took me a while to get there.
Why?
Well, so cob lights, due to how they're constructed, being a single light, or single point of light, they are a lot more flexible in how you can modify and use them. So if you've got a panel light, that's it. Like the best you can do is maybe a layer diffusion, some barn doors. Like you can't really modify it that much more without really killing its output, like putting a bunch of fabric in between it, your subject or whatever. Whereas with cob lights, a lot of them have a Bowens mount, and there's tons of modifiers for a Bowens mount. You can do all sorts of stuff. You can do lanterns.
This one has a Bowens mount.
Yep, that one has a Bowens mount. You can do lanterns. You can do all sorts of umbrellas and whatever you want. Like basically any way that you want to modify that light, whether you wanted to spotlight, you want to put a snoot on it,
soft boxes,
you want to put a soft box
snoots,
on it, you can do it.
Fresnel style, yeah.
Exactly. So you can focus it, you can spread it out, you can do basically whatever you want. As a result, they are tremendously more flexible. However, they are definitely more expensive, and you have to buy the modifiers separately often, and it's just like you got to know what you want. Generally,
but my LED panels are RGB, so
now they are now there are RGB cob lights, but it's taken a lot longer to get to the point where they're worth it. RGB panel lights, or panel lights in general, they're very commonly RGB now. They are a lot cheaper. They're generally a lot easier to pack. They're smaller. They don't really need an extra modifier. You can stack multiple of them in a bag really easily. You can also get flexible ones.
I used to have one of those.
And flexible ones are really cool, and you can roll those up, and you can do all sorts of lighting that would be difficult or impossible other ways, like surrounding an object with a flexible panel, doing all sorts of fun stuff like that. So they do travel easier. They often have no active cooling at all. They just have the big heat sink on the back. The nice thing about them being really big and wide is they spread the heat out. So they're dead silent. There's no fan needed. There's no heatsink needed like you need with cob lights. And they have been around a lot longer. They're cheaper as a result. There's a much wider market for them. But Cobb lights, way higher output, way easier to modify. RGB is getting there. Often there are trade-offs with brightness if you have RGB or tunable color temperature white versus just a single like daylight balanced Cobb is where you're going to get the most output. But there are options there. So and the Cobb market in general is getting cheaper over time. If you're going to put them on a desk, like your streamer or whatever, just get some panel lights. Like it'll take way less depth. It'll be way easier to set up. Just do panels. If you have a studio, if you've got especially like lots of nice vertical space available, look at Cobb lights. Those might serve you better. And you'll see that people with fancier, like if you're into the YouTube photographer scene, the fancier studios will generally be lit by Cobb lights over panels, whereas the more modest ones will be panels. Nothing to be ashamed of there, but if you know what you're doing, you'll probably lean towards Cobb lights.
Versus, I just got a bunch of those. They look like fluorescent banks, but they're actually LED. I just put a bajillion of them in the ceiling, and this show is lit with no lights. None. Yeah. Actually, it is lit with one light. Okay, if you're listening, that I know nothing changed for you, but I ran over and turned on a set of lights that I forgot to turn on earlier. The accent lights.
Yeah.
Makes it all fancy.
So yeah, Lou, those are that's a quick look into panel versus Cobb. If you're on a budget, panel. If you really know what you're doing with video lighting, get a Cobb light and modifiers for it.
There you go.
Good stuff.
I'm a weirdo that I don't own any Bowens mount except for this one. I don't own any Bowens modifiers. I got this one light to do a review of it, and I did my review and kept the light, but I don't use it because I don't have any modifiers for it.
Yeah, one upside to the Bowens stuff is
super generic.
It's
Everyone
really generic.
Makes everything for it.
Everybody makes Bowens stuff, and they're cross-compatible. You can use Bowens modifiers for a strobe on a video light and get similar results.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. So, thank you, Lou. Our second question comes from Ben. No, it's not me. Ben Tfield? Tfeld? Apologies. Ben T. Thank you so much for your question. So this is a little bit longer one, but I'm going to read the whole thing because I do think it's interesting. So I was viewing your video about the situation involving Pantone and thought that you might be interested in knowing some things. I'm always interested in knowing some things. Hit us.
Keep
what
learning.
You got? Okay. Should you further engage? A brief about who I am, the other Ben, not me.
Ben T.
Ben T. I'm an authorized reseller of ErgoSoft, RIP, which enables refined control of the... he said RIP. I don't know if he's saying that doesn't exist anymore. Or I don't know what that is, but... All right,
I
sorry,
assume it does.
I'll continue.
He is selling it.
He is selling it, so... I said it like it doesn't exist anymore, but he sells it actively. Anyway, I'll continue. Sorry. Let's see, which enables refined control of the print process with inkjet printers and cutters. I do color management consulting in support of people's color-related work. Okay, so this hit you right here where it matters. Okay.
You're in the trenches.
You're in the trenches. Before the rent extraction tool known as Pantone Connect. Dun, dun, dun. We're going to link to that episode down below. The way that you got lab D50 numbers for Pantone swatches was use a piece of software known as the Pantone Color Manager. It was available for both Windows and Mac. You could either one-time purchase or license it by having an X-Rite color measurement device or licensed dongle for the i1 profiler attached to your computer. You could also one-time purchase a spectral power distribution specifications per swatch. Pantone Color Manager is sadly not easily found anymore, and it looks like those of us who have it aren't going to benefit much from it since it seems that they've disabled all updates to the fan decks.
Of course they have.
Of course they have.
Yeah.
They don't want you getting stuff for free. I think that the ultimate solution to the Pantone problem is essentially what could be called a crowdsourced or open source communication color system. I would like to know your thoughts about something like this. Thank you for the video with hopes for continuing success in what you do. Thank you so much for those kind words and the incredibly thoughtful question. So
Yeah, this was awesome to have you reach out like
yeah,
this.
that is an incredibly in-depth and specific question, and hell yes, I want to dig into the trenches on this. Okay, so the real question comes down to the end. What do you think about crowdsourced or open source color communication system?
In short, that would be awesome. I see.
How many more colors are there? Like, hasn't every
only a few?
I feel like that British explorer way back when of like everything that has been invented has already been invented. There are no more colors.
Yep.
Like haven't we already kind of covered the spectrum of what colors are? Like, what updates are there? Honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we only.
I'm gonna start by saying I come at this from a point of complete ignorance.
We only went from recently 16.7 million standard to like over a billion standard, with more to come. How many more could there be?
You know what? Fine. I'm going to say that I have worked in studios where we've done lab color work, which is very rare. I've worked on most of the studios that I worked in. We needed to do CMYK Grackle color standards. When we do really big client work, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Leatherman, when they give us a color, it needs to exactly be that color, even one deviation is incorrect. So I understand the importance of having color calibration, and I have the technical skills to do color calibration. That said, I have never actually used the Pantone color manager. The way that I've always done color calibration is this light has a little blue strip on the side. I would hold this under a light box that is like perfectly CRI, like 99.999 CRI, and I would look at it with my trained eyeballs, and I would look at it on the screen and go, "Yep, I did it. That's right. That is how I did color." I kid you not, that is how I get accurate color. I'm pretty darn good at my job. It's pretty darn accurate. I do have some tools that I use to double check my measurements. Like I have sensor tools that can tell me exactly what this color is, and I have ways of mathematically, number-wise, getting to the color. Sometimes those fail and create some artifacting, and so I'll come up with an alternative process that matches that first color. But I have ways of mathematically getting to the correct color, but a lot of times I'm eyeballing to make sure that it looks correct in addition to mathematically being correct, and sometimes you can't have both. But that said, I've worked a lot in color critical situations, and I've never, ever, ever used the Pantone color manager.
I
don't know. I have no idea.
I would say I am pro a crowdsourced option. I think that ultimately, to be negative about this, anybody who works in such a color critical situation will likely pay this rent extraction scheme, as you pointed it out.
For people like me, so this is an episode that we have in our pipeline coming out of like, can you actually become a photographer and like make it a career? Yes, you absolutely can. But for people like me, that $15 a month of like, oh, that feels like, the pound of flesh being taken out. But for these giant studios that are doing,
they don't care.
Yeah, they're doing 6 figures, 7 figures. They don't care. It's $15.
Yeah,
they're gonna pay it.
However, I do think a crowdsourced or open source option would be awesome. I am a relatively big fan, I would say, of the open source community. I work with a lot of that stuff. I think it's really interesting. There are some communities that could lead to something like this. There's a huge community around televisions, around figuring out how to accurately calibrate and get good colors out of your television. Big community around that. There's other communities around hardware, especially in the streaming and kind of broadcast space. There's an app called Companion, which is amazing. It basically interfaces with like probably thousands of different pieces of proprietary, official hardware at this point, but interfaces with all this different hardware to do all these different things, coordinate together. Do these really amazing, multi-cam, multi-effect streams or broadcasts. There are communities out there that do stuff that's very similar to this. the big sticking point I feel like is coming up with a standard that everybody needs to agree on and making sure that you have hardware that is open enough to be compatible with that standard. You're still going to have to measure it. You pointed out the X-Rite color checkers is a thing. I actually own one of those for doing monitor calibrations and TV calibrations.
I don't know the X-Rite one. I actually have one by Spider though, and there's Color Monkey, which I think is there's iProfile, there's X-Rite. There's a lot of different companies, but they are all doing the same thing with the same goal.
Yeah. And so I feel like if you get hardware that's open enough that you can build, integrate that into a color system, have a standard that everybody agrees to, have a distribution platform that everybody agrees to, I think that would be great. I think there are a lot of very passionate people out there, like I pointed out with the television space, that would do this for free, that would help build this database for free on their own time just because they're passionate about it.
I kind of feel like it's the same issue of trying to get Apple to convert to USB-C. Yep. Apple's like, no, we have our own proprietary thing, and it works for us because no one else can have it.
Not anymore, thanks to you.
We want to stick with this, and I do feel like it's going to have to take some oversight or intervention to get everyone to conform to a standard.
Yeah.
Pantone essentially has a monopoly. Can you think of any other color system?
Nope.
Yep.
Other than
that's
samples.
It. Yeah. Well, that's okay. So that's
not really
Free-tone-ish, but that's not a color system.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
One of the big problems I feel like with a crowdsourced system like this is it's going to take time. So let's say we start, building this right now, like almost certainly no one is going to be paid to work on something like this full time. You need developers working on hardware and software. You need a distribution platform. Thankfully, the internet makes that pretty easy, but you still need a way, database software to talk to everybody's different software, and the database of stuff of hardware and software and colors and everything that integrates here. If that's being built by volunteers, you're not going to have something that's up and running, I feel like, anytime soon for professionals to use. And even then, a professional might feel, well, I don't know if I can trust this 100%. Like this is not a paid for tool. There aren't people whose jobs rely on this tool being accurate. Should I use this, or should I pay the $15 a month to Pantone? That's my perspective on it. I personally would be a huge fan. I think open source is good. I think something like this would be awesome. There's so much good out there in the open source movement, but
it's going to take a while before it gets traction or reliability.
But hey, if you know of something like this, if this is kind of like a soft pitch to see what we think before you share, hey, by the way, I'm working on this, or I know people that are working on this, let us know. You send us a follow-up message and say, hey, this is the start of this. Take a look. What do you think? We'd be happy to take a peek at it and share our thoughts. But that's what I think right now. I would love for something like that to happen. However, I need to be realistic, and I think the realistic look is, if it does happen, it's not going to be anytime soon. Even if it does happen, pros probably are still going to pay Pantone. Yeah. Unfortunately, not a great. Even though that's negative, I feel like it's just like the real world, unfortunately.
No, that is absolutely what's going to happen.
I'd love to see it happen.
Like, before I even heard about the news, like, it was out for like 24 hours. I was talking to some photographer friend, and he's like, yeah, the studio I work at has already upgraded. It just day one, boom. Okay. And like, oh, we have 10 stations. Each one's $15, $150 a month. Okay.
Yeah. The realistic answer is, I don't have a huge amount of confidence, but the personal, ideal world answer would be, yes, please. Let's have this yesterday.
Yes, please. But is that going to happen? Is that going to happen?
I'd use it.
I'm going to use Stuart Samples because I just updated, and now I see black bars, and I'm very sad.
Yeah.
So
great.
There you go.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
Let us know if you know something like that. Reach out.
Thank you so much for the amazing and insightful question. That was That was incredibly specific, and I love it so much. So if you're out there and you have a specific question, you can email us. How do they email us, Stuart?
hello@photo-op.show.
Absolutely. You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel. This comment actually, he skipped all that, went straight to my website and said, "Hey, I watch your show." He filled out my contact form.
You found the other Ben.
He found me. I'm like, cool. I'll take it. That's awesome. Neat.
Sweet.
He also got to see some of my cool work on his way. But yeah, so the other pitch we want to do here is if you want to help support the channel, I do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/nomcreative, the same YouTube channel that you might be watching this on. Right now, it's just one. Starting in the new year, one of the things that I like to do is expand that Patreon tier option. But right now it's just $1. It's a tip jar. If you feel guilty about not giving us any ad revenue because you use an ad blocker, you my dear, you now have absolution. So there you go.
Perfect.
So get that ad block absolution for $1 a month over at the Patreon, patreon.com/nomcreative. You can email us hello@photo-op.show and send in your questions. Let us know what you'd like to see next time. If you have questions or ideas for future episodes, you can email us at hello@photo-op.show.
Watch us on Ben's YouTube channel at nomcreative.
As in om nom nom.
Share this with a friend, and you can listen to Photo Op anywhere podcasts are sold.
Or download it. 'Cause it's free.